If this was an NBA playoff, like best out of seven thing, like we're really in World War III and we're probably down 0-2. So in the economic war between the United States and China, the Chinese just decided it's no longer about chips and manufacturing. The Chinese just launched a worldwide attack on brain power. So today we're going to talk about what's called a K visa, what they are, what it means for China and the global economy, and the implications for the United States. Let's get into it. So what is the K visa? On August 7th, 2025, the China State Council issued an order number 814 amending the entry and exit regulations to create a new visa category called the K visa for young science and technology talent. It became effective, October 1st, 2025. So essentially what this did is how a lot of countries have working visas, like I'm sure you hear about like the H-1B in the United States. Many of them you have to have someone who guarantees you a job, right? Or an employer will say, hey, I'll sponsor this person. They can come into the country and they can come work for me. What the Chinese have decided to do is they said, well, we're going to remove those regulations to make it easier for people to come here under the conditions that they're STEM graduates, right? So STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, part of what this means strategically for the Chinese is that they're really leaning into this chips war or the war on technology, and they're looking at it in a different way. They're saying, okay, you know what? This is a war on talent, right? These problems are getting solved by people, certain types of people. So we need to make sure we're the most attractive place for that particular type of person. And this is something a lot of Americans don't really talk about as much, right? So when people talk about the DEI stuff in higher education, a lot of times people assume it's for minorities and these different people who maybe don't qualify to have access to the Ivy League. Well, one of the main things that Americans export are degrees, right? Aside from death and fake money, but we'll talk about that another time. Many of the different incentives to look at the total, like a total student, to see what they've done in the community, to see if that person would be a good fit, is so all Americans, white students included, would have a chance at the best schools and universities in the United States. Because if they went just purely off of academic performance, the majority of our best colleges and universities would be kids from China, kids from India, and most American students would lose out because, as we know, American K through 12 education is atrocious. So now I'm not sure if you guys are keeping up with some of the issues that they're having in higher education, but one of them is there's starting to be a reduction of funding and investment in research and R&D. So a lot of people in the science and engineering and those communities are becoming very frustrated, especially with the current administration and kind of how American culture is shifting towards this like anti-intellectualism. You don't need college, like books aren't important, it's a waste of time. As Americans are shifting towards that, the Chinese are now trying to position themselves saying like, hey, if you're smart, you have these particular skills, you can come here, you can solve our problems, you can work for our companies, and we'll provide you, the research grants, the things that you need so you can function, you can maximize whatever gifts that you have are. Now, a big part why this is so important is because most of the developed world is having issues with replacement, right? Like people aren't having kids to the same degree that they once were in previous generations. As a result of that, populations are starting to decline. So you're literally running out of people to fuel your economy in most of the developed world. So what happens as a result of that? The position that Americans have taken previously is that we leaned on immigration. Now, I think that what the Chinese have done is they looked at that and said, okay, this worked in these ways. These are the problems that they had. And China's saying, okay, well, we're also going to start to lean on immigration, but we're just going to be a little bit more picky about the qualifications for the immigration to make sure that we're getting the type of people that we want in our country that can help us with our global strategic mission instead of just having borders and just kind of taking people to do maybe lower paid, lower skilled labor. We want the high paid, high skilled people and have all of them come here and support our economy. And this plays very well into the Chinese marketing and branding as of late, right? The idea that, oh, we're open for business. We're the place that you want to invest in. If you're private equity or you're one of these big investment firms, you want to put your money in China. We have the best companies. We have the best manufacturing. We have the best technology. And now they're trying to say we have the best talent because we're the best place in the world for talent. Some of the implications that this has, depending on how it works, because everything always, people have intentions, but there's always some unintended consequences. If this works out the way the Chinese want it to, some of the potential problems is when you look at companies, for example, like I think the CEO of Ford has said that he was driving around, his daily driver was a Chinese electric vehicle because he was saying like the quality is so much better. The quality of their charging stations is so much better than the United States. So now we're using our tariffs to protect our companies because our companies today, right now, November 11th, Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day to my brothers and sisters that serve. Love and respect. Our automotive industry can't keep up with the Chinese automotive industry. Companies like BYD are putting out better quality vehicles at a lower price point than Ford, GM, and I don't know if Dodge and Jeep is called Stellantis still. I think they were bought out recently, but we can't compete with them now. So imagine, let's fast forward 10, 15 years. All of the engineering, mathematics, science, technology graduates are all now going to work for those companies, and they're not working for the Fords and the GMs, the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins. Like, they're not going to work for American manufacturers. So what does that say about the economic advantage that the Chinese are going to have over us 10, 15 years down the line, let alone 30, 40, 50? It's really crazy, like, when I think about it. Like, if this was an NBA playoff, like, best out of 7 thing, like we're really in World War III, and we're probably down 0-2. Because even to the point of the government subsidies, right? Like, we have this whole idea of companies being too big to fail in the United States. And the issue with that is, if you're a small startup tech company and you're trying to compete with a Facebook or a Meta, or you're a bank and you're trying to compete with the JP Morgan, you're a small regional bank, because the government doesn't let these big companies fail, these smaller, leaner, more efficient companies never get the chance to take up that talent, take up that market share, and grow and develop. So what's happening now? A lot of private equity companies and a lot of these hedge funds are saying the only place to really invest money and to actually see a good return are in places overseas, such as the Chinese. Because the Chinese, they're saying, no, we want our companies, we want competition. We want these companies to thrive and compete. And as they're a developing nation, they're better structured for long-term growth than many of the companies in the United States, because most of these companies are big. And if you work for a big company, they get stupid and they get bureaucratic. Starting to happen is there's this weird positioning of, even if you have looking to be an investor, it's like, okay, well, you can invest in China or you can invest in a small company in the United States. But for that small company to give you a big return, the big companies where everybody works have to fail. So it's almost like there's this weird thing where the Chinese are trying to position Americans to where, for us to even be able to compete, we have to allow our economy to die. And I don't think that, looking at the current political environment, that the people who we've elected are ever going to allow that to happen. And that's primarily because of, I think, what, again, by touching on a point I made earlier, when you talk about the shift in culture and the anti-intellectualism and how that's starting to kind of to grow. And this is coming from somebody that does business coaching. Like, I see it a lot in the space that I'm in. People say the whole, you don't need college, you don't need the books, you don't need that. You just need implementation and a good attitude and mindset. What's starting to happen, and you're starting to see it in a smaller scale in the United States, is what's called a brain drain. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and all my family's in Louisville. And when I talk to them, a lot of times they explain how, man, the city's different. In certain communities, it's hard to find people who care about more heady things. And even when I was there, the first company I built, I remember it was like I would go months without having anybody to just to even talk to or bounce ideas off of. And most of the people that I had that I was friends with that cared, just I don't want to be condescending and say like people are unintelligent. I'm not saying that, but just people who have an interest in more philosophical, intellectual things. Like, if I'm trying to say, oh, for example, I would meet with other business owners and I would talk about things like, oh, return on ad spend and human psychology things and how it related to sales and like, no, I feel like in places like Kentucky, there wasn't as big of a group of people that were interested in that. And even the people that I knew at that time that had those interests, everybody left. And I'm gonna tell you a story because it's a small channel and we family. So I can talk to y'all like y'all the homies, because most likely y'all are my homies. One of my brothers is from the Air Force, like my dog, my right-hand man. He gets married, we go to DC for the wedding. I stayed in the Airbnb with this lady, her name, I believe, was Mila, and she worked at the World Bank. One of the things she said to me, first off, she asked me how old I was. I told her, I think at the time I was like 28, 29. She's like, yeah, before you turn 30, you're going to live in a major metropolitan city. I was like, what are you talking about? Which I now live in Las Vegas. And she was like, yeah, man. So what's happening in the United States is what's called a brain drain. When you hear people say things like, oh, by year 2035, 95% of people are going to be living in major cities. That's why. What's happening is all the smartest people, you're more productive around other smart people. So they're all leaving these little pockets of the United States. And I'm coming back to the China thing. Just give me a minute. All the smartest people are leaving these smaller pockets of the United States and they're moving to major cities. And one of the ugliest things, one of the ugliest things that you are almost not allowed to say is the fact that intelligence tends to be genetic. So the people who have intellectual gifts are overwhelmingly moving to major cities, and they're meeting other people that are intellectually that are mentally they're gifted. They're just smart. It doesn't mean you're better. I'm not saying that. We all have our different gifts and all this other stuff, but just this on this one thing because of that relates to what we're talking about today. And they're having these super brilliant babies, and they're extremely hyper productive, and they're making all this money, and they're thriving. And what's happening in these small towns is the people who maybe don't have those, they can have other gifts, but they might not have that particular gift. They're reproducing with other people who also are stuck there because they don't have those same gifts. And then the results of that are people who maybe are less likely, nothing's guaranteed, it's all a dice roll. There's probability, but it's all a dice roll, that are maybe less likely to have those same gifts. So those parts of the world maybe don't have the same, are less likely to have the amount of brain power needed to sustain certain parts of their economies, and these economies are dying. That's in America. What the Chinese are trying to do is China, places like Dubai, are trying to reduce their taxes, keep their living spaces safe, keep them free and fun for, again, intellectually gifted people, so that they can get all of that talent to come to stay where they are, and they can be hyper productive and build this super economy. You see it now, very pronounced in England. I think England is losing more millionaires than any other country in the world, and most of them are going to places like Dubai because, like, oh, this is where I can be productive. Like, they don't hate me for being productive, for making money, for maximizing my gifts. I'm not hated here, and I don't have to give my money to a government full of people that I wouldn't hire at minimum wage that's telling me I need to give them half of my money. I'd much rather go live there. So I think that's the same play the Chinese are trying to run now, and they're trying to soak up and create this brain drain on everywhere else, because you can't run your economy, you can't run your military, you can't compete with me if you don't have the talent to compete. So I think that this is exactly what the Chinese are doing, and I think that's exactly what their intention is by launching these K visas. But like I said, we don't know how it's going to play out. Most times when governments try to do things, there's usually a million unintended consequences. Many times whenever governments launch a particular incentive, usually the exact opposite happens. So we don't know. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Feel free to ask me any questions. Again, this is a super small channel, so I respond to everybody. I like engaging with you guys. If there's a video on anything related to business or the economy that you want me to make, let me know. I'll happily make it, and I'll happily answer you guys' questions. Remember, I'm here for you.